perfect world was a dream that the primitive cerebral
He's a tyrant! He's a sadist!
You're all going to die down here.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
All right, here's John Turner with the Gnostic Countercultures. Hey, John, are you enjoying it?
Oh yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, very interesting, lively discussion.
Oh, wonderful.
Great to see, I think, especially so many young scholars. I've been very impressed with their papers. I think raised some interesting questions. You know, to what extent then are these Gnostic movements really countercultural? And in my own case, I thought that in some cases they, in a way, weren't really that much of a sort of protest movement. But in other respects, they were. And one of the things that interested me, of course, is some of the accusations you get from some of the later church fathers like Epiphanius, who accused them of, you know, a lot of licentious behavior, really a kind of sexual sacramentalism. I always had thought that that was more or less a libelous charge against these people, mainly, of course, because Epiphanius himself had been burned by these people. But on the other hand, it's interesting that even Plotinus, a completely independent source, thinks of them as engaging in certain kinds of immoral behavior. He doesn't give very much detail, not like Epiphanius did. Anybody who's interested in this really has to read Epiphanius' account about the Borborites and Fibionites and people like this. But it was Plotinus is less explicit. But it's some independent evidence. The problem is it's difficult to square with all the original sources, which really make these people look like prudes and highly ascetic and so forth.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you very much, John, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, will do. Thanks a lot.
All right, we're here with Dylan Burns at the Gnostic Counterculture. Are you enjoying yourself?
Yes, I am.
Good, good. And from what you've seen, experienced, would you say the Gnostics were counterculture or subversive?
I think there were some things that they did, thought, and wrote that may have seemed very countercultural and subversive to some of their contemporaries, yes.
All right, and what about the term Gnosticism? Where are you at with that?
I think it is a useful term for us scholars to use to talk about particular currents and ideas in the ancient world. Absolutely.
All right, wonderful. All right, enjoy the rest of the show, as Pink would say.
Yes, certainly will.
We've got Erik Davis, definitely my favorite PKD scholar here at the Gnostic Countercultures. How you doing, Erik?
Excellent.
You enjoying yourself?
No, I'm having a great time.
All right, so you're not going to Disneyland, huh?
No, it's been good. They've been taking very good care of us.
All right, wonderful. All right, well, the question I'm asking everybody, do you see the Gnostics as counterculture from what you've seen and experienced?
I think there's definitely elements of that in ancient Gnosticism. The idea that the ruler of the world is a tyrant and a fool, I think, has an inherent countercultural energy to it and a sort of critique of experience. But obviously, that too becomes another kind of religious mode that may or may not be countercultural. And in the modern era, when people are taking these things and transforming them and mutating them, it definitely feeds into a counterculture energy of within the literal counterculture, which is what I'm talking about. And their Gnosticism is very much part of a questioning of reality and of the existing power structure.
Great, and okay, and Gnosticism is a term. Keep it or trash it?
I think it's really important to keep it and keep wrangling with it. I think that in attempting to wipe away the term, I think scholars are not just doing damage to the own record, which I think has some support for using the term, but that it also is sort of a weird covert attempt to keep out the popular and modern conversation of Gnosticism from sort of staining their scholarly work, when I think that precisely that kind of staining and cross bridge exchanges are really important.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah, I'm loving this conference. The last session was particularly interesting to me because it talks about how people today are trying to integrate strange experiences and trying to find the language to do it. And some of the Gnostic language seems to work for them. But it raises a lot of questions, about, I do think we make it up. There's a fictional part, but as I was saying to Erik, there's fiction with a small f, which is just your ordinary person just bullshitting, and there's fiction with a capital F, which is being created through us. Like Philip Dick said, instead of just by me, it feels like it's through me. And people wrestle with trying to make sense of these feelings like that. And I think that's an interesting question for us to think about. It seems fundamental to me. Yeah.
And what about the term Gnosticism? Should we keep it or throw it away?
It works for me. I don't have a problem with using it. I think sometimes people try to keep the academic rooms too tidy, and I'm not one of those kind of guys. Life is messy. People are going to use the term in slightly different ways, and we just need to understand what they mean by it. Yeah.
And do you see Gnosticism or the Gnostics as subversive?
Depends what I'm holding. They're not, for me, they're not subversive in that sense. But in terms of the larger cultural institutions, the religions, it almost by definition is subversive to them. But I'm entirely comfortable with that, so it sort of seems normally subversive to me. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Gregory Shaw, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
And thanks for doing this. You're doing a great job.
All right. Did a great job helping with this. And so did you enjoy yourself? Tired?
Very tired. But yes, I enjoyed myself immensely. An incredible collection of papers.
All right. And what do you think? Do you think the term Gnosticism should stay or go?
I think it does great work in terms of assembling a certain amount of text in the ancient world. We need to sort of think it through on a deeper level, but it does that. I think it's more important as a modern term that Gnosticism sort of is creating new religious responses and new religious identities because it exists, right? And so it's a matter of tracing it from there.
Yeah, that's working. Do you see Gnosticism as counterculture or subversive?
By definition, I suppose the original definitions would have made it more subversive or transgressive, and that has had a sort of echo in the contemporary era. So if you want to say transgressive, subversive, sure.
All right, thanks. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Matt. Jeff Kripal here, wonderful host. Are you enjoying it so far?
Oh, yeah, it's a great event.
I think everybody else here. So from what you've seen, do you see the Gnostics as more counterculture or less counterculture, or more subversive or less subversive?
Well, obviously, I think it depends on the time period and whether that's a reasonable way of thinking about culture and counterculture. I think the people working in the modern world are more comfortable with it than the colleagues working in the ancient world. But that's predictable. I think it's a useful category. We got to determine how far we want to stretch it.
Mm-hmm. And what about the term Gnosticism? Keep it or discard it?
Oh, I love it. I think it's great. My dad, when I used to go fishing with my dad, I always loved to play in his fishing tackle box, and there were these fluorescent rubber worms in there that I just thought were the coolest thing in the world. But you could never catch a fish with them. And he used to say, "No, Jeff, you got to use the bait that the fish want, not the bait that you like." And that's kind of how I see the word Gnostic. It works. It works in the culture. People tend to understand it. They may not understand it historically, but it has a punch. It has an edge to it. And so I'm more of the artist than the scientist there. I think we need to use words that communicate and not get lost in these technicalities.
Mm-hmm. Well, wonderful. Well, let's enjoy the rest of it.
All right, thanks.
Jeff.
Thank you.
If we stay the course, we are dead. We are all dead.
We were supposed to make the world a better place. What happened?
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I know Kung Fu.
You either die a hero, or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore. This whole thing is insane.